Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to KIMS Online Neonatal Education. I'm Dr. Aravinda Lochani. Is everyone able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible, ma'am.
I'll just share my presentation.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible, ma'am.
Share screen. Share my presentation.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
మరి ఇట్లా ఉంది. Is my presentation visible, Arna?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible, ma'am. We have to make it full screen.
Okay, I'll make it. Is my presentation visible, Arna?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible, ma'am. We have to make it full screen.
Okay, I'll start my presentation now. Today we will discuss about the pulmonary graphics in the neonates. The last two sessions of Cuddles one online presentations, we have learned about the basics of ventilation. So we'll just have a brief recap of what you have learned already, and then we'll go to the pulmonary graphics. In simple words, what is ventilation? Ventilation means the delivery of flow and pressure to a patient's lung in order to effect a change in the lung volume. As you all know, there are different modes in a ventilator, which are intermittent mandatory ventilation and patient-triggered ventilation. In the patient-triggered ventilation, again, there are three different modes, which are synchronized intermittent mandatory ventilation, assist control mode or SIPV mode, or it is also mentioned as PTV only in SLA 6000 ventilator, and pressure support ventilation. In SIMV mode, as soon as the baby initiates the respiration, all the breaths are supported by the ventilator at the set defined rate. In assist control mode, the rate is also defined by the baby, in which all the breaths of the baby are supported by the ventilator. And in the pressure support ventilation, even the termination sensitivity will be there. So the rate and the termination of the breath is also decided by the baby. Let's see few small definitions. So first, what is the complaints? Complaints is the distensibility of the lung, which is defined as delta V by delta P, which is the pressure required to bring about a change in the volume of the lung. So if you see a baby with RTS, the baby will require more pressure to bring about a change in the volume. That means the baby has a low compliance. If there is a low compliance, the functional residual capacity will be low, as you can see on the right side of the screen. And if there is a hyper expansion of the lung, even if we increase the pressure, there will not be much increase in the volume of the lung. So that is called high FRC, over expansion of the lung. So we should always try to ventilate the baby along this rapid slope only, which is resistance which is offered for the gas flow through the ET tube and the ventilator for the baby. So it is directly proportional to the length and viscosity and inversely proportional to the fourth power of the radius. That's why we cut the ET tubes to reduce the length, to reduce the resistance for the baby. And if the ET tube size is small, then that is inversely proportional, that increases the resistance. The normal tidal volumes which we give for the newborn are 4 to 6 ml per kg. And then what is tidal volume? It is the amount of air which goes in and out of the baby for every breath. So what is minute ventilation? The tidal volume multiplied by the respiratory rate of the baby is called as the minute ventilation. The normal minute ventilation for a newborn is around 200 to 480 ml per kg per minute. What is functional residual capacity? It is the volume of gas which is present in the lungs at the end of each expiration. Optimal FRC helps in maintaining the optimal ventilation perfusion ratio and helps in good gas exchange. So what is oxygenation dependent upon? It is dependent upon the mean airway pressure and the FiO2. If we change the map, we can increase the oxygenation for the baby. What is the CO2 elimination dependent upon? It is dependent upon the delta P and the rate. If the CO2 in the blood gas is high, we increase the delta P, and also the rate can be increased. And if the carbon dioxide is washout is there, then we should go down the decrease the delta P. So next, the pulmonary graphics is all about monitoring the ventilated baby. We have already ventilated the baby. Now we should monitor the baby. So how do we monitor? So it's not only about pulmonary graphics, the overall clinical examination of the baby, like the baby's vitals, heart rate, saturations, BPs, and overall color of the baby, perfusion of the baby, asynchrony, whether the breaths are synchronized, and the baby overall general condition like any edema is there, pallor is there, abdominal distension, everything should be monitored. So clinical examination of the baby is of prime importance first, then followed by the vitals as we see on the pulse oximeter. Then we cannot do ABG every time. We'll do twice or thrice in a day if the baby is very sick. So in the arterial blood gas, what all we will see? We will see the pH, PCO2, PO2, as well as the bicarbonate and base excess and lactate levels. It also gives some information about the hemoglobin of the baby and electrolyte levels. Then chest X-rays. These also can be done whenever indicated. So in the chest X-ray, what we'll be seeing the lung expansion and any edema, pulmonary edema is there, pneumothorax or effusion or consolidation, collapse, all these things, information we can get from the chest X-ray. Lung ultrasound is also a upcoming branch of point of care ultrasound, in which we can see the same findings like consolidation, effusion, TTNB, all these things can be confirmed, pneumothorax, everything can be confirmed in the lung ultrasound also. While monitoring the ventilatory settings of the baby, we are using the pulmonary graphics. Today, we will discuss in detail about the pulmonary graphics. So what is pulmonary graphics? It is nothing but the graphical representation of these three variables, which I have told at the beginning about the ventilation. These three variables, that is the pressure, flow, and volume, will be represented graphically on the ventilator. So the display of this valuable information about the lung mechanics and patient ventilator synchrony whether there is synchrony is there, and the response to different ventilation strategies which we are applying to the baby, and pharmacological interventions like giving surfactant, giving the bronchodilator nebulizations. The changes can be seen in the pulmonary graphics. So this is the typical graphical representation on the ventilator. Here we can see the PIP, inspiratory pressure is kept at 16 and the end expiratory pressure is kept at 4. I time is kept at 0.35 and the rate is kept at 30. So here you can see the scalars. The scalars is nothing but the pressure, flow and volume are displayed against the time. So here you can see the top one is the pressure scalar. And these orange ones are the breaths which are triggered by the baby. So whenever the baby triggers a breath which is detected by the flow sensor, which we will come to in the subsequent slides, then the ventilator gives a positive breath. Inspiratory breath will start from here and then it reaches the peak inspiratory pressure. Okay, and then it goes into the expiratory phase and reaches the baseline. So the baseline will be the PEEP. And then the second one is the flow scalar. In this there will be inspiratory and expiratory loops which are further divided into two parts, which I will explain later. And this is the volume scalar. Here you can know about the maximal tidal volume which is reached by the ventilator. So what are the objectives of learning the pulmonary graphics? So we will identify the graphics which are displayed by the mechanical ventilators and make the changes. Ultimately, it is needed to improve the patient outcomes. However, till now there are no randomized control trials that have suggested improved outcomes with monitoring graphics. That means not only the graphics, we should examine the baby as a whole. So what are all the different types of flow sensors? So the first one is the abdominal motion, detecting the abdominal motion. This is the applanation transducer or grass by capsule. And then the thoracic impedance is detected. That is the change in the chest wall movement of the baby is detected by the ECG leads. These two are outdated now, and currently we are using the flow sensors. The one which is commonly in use is the one with the heated wire anemometer. And then the variable pressure orifice differential pressure transducer is available in some ventilators. The latest one is which detects the electrical activity of the diaphragm, which is called the NAVA method, neurally adjusted ventilatory assist, which measures the electrical activity changes in the diaphragm with the help of the transesophageal electrodes. So this is the typical flow sensor which is connected to the proximal end near the endotracheal tube of the baby. So how the flow sensor converts the flow into the display of pulmonary graphics that we see. So either the flow or the pressure, as we have discussed, the changes in the flow brings about the changes in the temperature of the heated wire anemometer. So then the heated wire anemometer cools down based on the level of the flow. To bring it back to the same temperature, how much electricity is needed, that is calibrated and then it is shown in a digital format and displayed on the monitor. That is the way how the pulmonary graphics works. So what are all the uses of pulmonary graphics? They are needed to optimize the ventilatory parameters, like as we have discussed, and then to decrease the ventilator-induced lung injury by monitoring the delivered tidal volume and evaluation of the infant's spontaneous efforts and thereby assessing the readiness for extubation and the therapeutic response to pharmacological agents like surfactant, bronchodilators, and preventing untoward events like ET tube block, air trapping, air leak. And we will also evaluate the respiratory trends with the help of waveforms and loops, which we will go in detail, and also the overall respiratory mechanics of the baby. And also disease evaluation like restrictive versus obstructive disease and the severity of the disease. And when the baby is recovering, also we can see the changes in the trends. So how to avoid ventilator-induced lung injury? By monitoring the delivered tidal volume and with the help of the flow sensor. So when we are this is the lung expansion curve. So when we are increasing the pressure for the baby, so initially there will not be much change in the volume. So this is the low FRC range. So here, as the pressure increases, the volume starts increasing rapidly. This is called as the rapid slope, or this is the lower inflection point. And once the pressure reaches a certain point, even if we increase the pressure, there will not be much change in the volume. Here, the lung is going into the over expansion phase. So we should always operate the ventilator keep the settings for the baby in the optimal FRC to avoid the ventilator-induced lung injury. What are all the different types of trauma for the baby, like volume trauma, barotrauma, and atelectative trauma? When there is atelectative trauma, the alveoli will be not be opening, and the repeated opening and closing of the alveoli will also damage the alveolar endothelium. Volume trauma is also not good for the baby, as well as increased pressure is also not good. And biotrauma results in increased production of free radicals like TNF alpha and interleukin 8. Rheotrauma is caused by the damage induced by the excessive flow. So these all combined together, they cause the ventilator-induced lung injury, which is avoided by uh, delivering the pressures at the optimal FRC. So this is the lower inflection point, where with the increase in the pressure, the volume increases rapidly. And then if you see here, beyond, if we increase the pressure here, there is beaking is coming. So this is the like penguin's nose or beacon, where there is not much a difference in the volume which we are delivering to the baby, but the lung is going into overinflation. So this beaking should be avoided. This is the pressure volume loop. Beaking should be avoided in the PV loop. Then again, when the baby goes into expiration, the volume comes down slowly and then decreases rapidly, and then it ends here. It is not going completely down. This is the PV. Okay, so this is the opening pressure for the lung, here PO. So as we increase the pressure increases like this, and then it goes to the full expansion. But when the pressure comes down, immediately the volume will not close. So this is according to the Laplace law, which is the pressure is equal to 2 into surface tension by radius. So here, when it is going down, this is the critical closing pressure. So the opening pressure and the closing pressure are not the same for any ventilated baby. Okay, and this difference is known as hysteresis. I hope you have understood this. So this is 2T by R. And here already the alveoli have opened. So when the pressure is going down, the alveoli do not close immediately. So here only the closing point occurs, but the opening point is a little bit far. So the difference between the opening and closing, and the difference between the inspiratory limb and the expiratory limb is called as the hysteresis of the lung. So, despite having so many advantages, there are some limitations of the pulmonary graphics also. So, so the graphics are ultimately displayed by the machine only. So there can be any technical problems related to the machine which does not cause the display of the graphics. And within the patient and in between the patients also, a lot of variability will come because of the difference in the lung disease and the improvement. Once the improvement is coming also, there will be changes in the lung mechanics. So intra and inter-patient variability will be there. And of course, the interpretation is based on the clinician's experience. And in the neonates, we generally use uncovered tubes only. So there will be leak with uncovered tubes. And it represents only the lung, not the overall clinical condition of the baby. And of course, cost. The high-end ventilators with having flow sensors and display of the pulmonary graphics will not be there in every setup. So coming to the graphics, so these are divided into scalars and loops. Scalars are the measured parameters in which the three variables, pressure, volume, and flow, are plotted against the time. So this is the pressure waveform which we have already discussed. So it starts with the peak and expiratory pressure peak, and then the breath PIP pressure increases slowly. So when the at the beginning of the respiration, the alveoli will be at the peak. So the airway will be also at the peak. So once the breath is triggered by the baby, the ventilator starts delivering the PIP. So then the pressure in the ventilator tubing increases. So from the airway starts flowing to the alveoli. So suppose if we have kept the PEEP at 5, it will slowly increase to 8, 10, 12, 15, whatever PIP we have kept. If we have kept PIP to 15, so the airway pressure increases from 5 to 15. So as the airway pressure increases, air always flows from the higher pressure to the lower pressure. So at the end of the inspiratory I time, at the end of the inspiratory phase here, both the airway pressure and the alveolar pressure will be equal to 50. Then the decelerating phase starts, but the I time does not end here. I time actually ends here. So then the baby will go into expiration. So this is the flow waveform loop. It has two biphasic. It has the positive and both positive and negative deflection. So this the one above this line is the positive deflection. It has a rapid accelerating phase and a decelerating phase. Similarly, there is an expiratory which also has two phases. And here the breath ends. This is the volume waveform which shows the tidal volume, maximum tidal volume which is delivered to the baby. Okay, so this is the flows, pressure, flow, and volume scalars. So loops are deduced parameters in which these three parameters are plotted against each other. But commonly studied loops are pressure volume loop and flow volume loop. The flow pressure loop is not commonly studied, so we are not discussing about it today. So this is the PV loop. So in this, this is the inspiratory part, and this is the expiratory part. So this part is the FRC, functional residual capacity, and this is the tidal volume which is given to the baby. So coming to the pressure time scalar. So in this you can see it's already at the peak. The inspiration begins over here and then goes to the PIP over here. And then the expiration happens here. So this is the I time. Till here is the I time. And this part is the E time. This part is the inspiration and this is the expiration. So what is the entire area below that pressure scalar? This is the mean airway pressure. Suppose if you want to increase the mean airway pressure, how you can increase it? So it can be increased either by increasing the PIP or increasing the P or by increasing the I time. I'll just show you. Or increasing the flow and decreasing the E time. So out of all these, increase in the PEEP results in maximal increase in the mean airway pressure. And oxygenation, as you already know, depends on the mean airway pressure and the FiO2. So what are all the things we can learn from the pressure scalar? The first one is the changes which we are bringing about in increasing the mean airway pressure. So this is by, if we increase the PIP like this, obviously the shaded area will increase till here. So increasing the PIP, then increasing the PEEP and increasing the I time. If we increase the I time, it will increase till here. If we decrease the E time, it will increase the mean airway pressure as well as the flow. So the second one which we learned from the pressure scalar is the effect and adequacy of the flow. As you can see on the left side, there is less flow and the scalar itself looks triangular and very small. So the second one which we are learning from the pressure scalar is to know about the flow. That is the flow starvation is there or not. If there is more flow, it will become more like a square wave. So you can see one more here, adequate flow and inadequate flow. This is the flow starvation. And then what is the difference between these two? So we can say whether it is a time cycled breath or a flow cycled breath. This is the PSV mode, the second one. The triangular one is the PSV mode. This is the time cycled breath. Because the PAP is increasing to the maximum and then it is remaining there until the I time and then it is going down at the E time. Whereas in this, so the time cycled modes are IMP mode, SAMP, assist control mode, all the modes. This is the pressure support mode in which the uh, PSV mode in which the volume slowly increases and once it reaches the volume, then it slowly comes to. So this is the flow cycle mode. So identifying different pressure control, if you can identify whether it is a pressure controlled breath or a volume controlled breath. So in the pressure controlled breath, the pressure will reach the maximum and then it will plateau like that and then goes into the expiration. Whereas in the volume ventilation, the once the baby, it looks like triangular. So we are targeting the volume. So once it reaches the appropriate volume, then it will go into the expiration. So if you can see what is the difference between this and this, the mean airway pressure will be less in the volume ventilation as compared to the pressure ventilation. In the square like this. Whereas the pressure ventilation will be first maximum PAP will be reached and the decremental inspiratory flow will be there. Then it will go into the expiration. The same one, pressure limited versus volume limited ventilation. So you can understand the pressure is reaching to the maximum and then it is maintaining the same volume and then going to the expiration. Here, it takes time to reach the maximum set volume, targeted tidal volume. Flow scalar in the volume control ventilation looks like this. Whereas the pressure scalar looks like this. So this is the spontaneous versus mechanical ventilator breath. So in the spontaneous, there will be the small inspiratory phase and expiration. Both look smaller in the spontaneous breath, whereas in the mechanical inflation, it looks a little bigger. If you can identify the ventilator, we can see in the ventilator after some time. So the spontaneous breaths will be looking smaller because the baby tries to breathe through the endotracheal tube. So if there is a small deflection, negative deflection before the beginning of the ventilation, it is assisted ventilation. So baby is taking a spontaneous effort over here, and then the trigger is sensed by the flow sensor, and then the ventilator gives the breath. This is the assisted ventilation. This is completely controlled ventilation where either the baby has not given the trigger and the ventilator is giving the breath. So what is this? What you can identify from this? So the flow rate, because of the excessive flow rate, the pressure has shot up very high, and then you can see a notch in the inspiratory waveform. So in the pressure scalar, and in the flow scalar, you can see a bump here. So if the flow rate is very high and the pressure is overshooting, then we can see this type of notch. So this is called as ringing. So here what happened? Can anyone tell me? So here the baby has tried to initiate a breath over here, but because of the trigger sensitivity we have kept very high, and the ventilator has not detected that breath. So after some time, the ventilator is giving the breath as usual. So this is due to insensitive trigger. The patient breath is not followed by the ventilator breath. Here we have to reduce the trigger sensitivity. Now coming to the, so there will be 4 phases as I already told you. Accelerating inspiratory flow, decelerating inspiratory flow, accelerating expiratory flow, and decelerating expiratory flow. So it will be biphasic. There will be both positive and negative deflection. So what are all the things we can learn from the flow scalar? We can optimize the trigger. We can optimize the inspiratory time. We can see if there is any airway resistance, airway obstruction, gas trapping, and gas leak. So the flow scalar is the most useful scalar. From this, we can get a lot of information. So this is how a flow scalar looks. Here, the inspiration will start. It goes into the peak inspiratory flow rate, and then this is volume, targeted tidal volume is there. So it is like this, and then it comes down in the decelerating inspiratory flow, and here the expiration will start, and then it comes to the baseline. So if there are any changes in this, then we will see the ventilator misadventures. If anything is there like leak or air trapping, anything is there, we can identify over here. This is how the normal one looks like. So this is the mechanical ventilator given breath. This is the spontaneous breath, which is smaller than the ventilator given breath. So here you can see this is flow cycled, as you can see, and this is the time cycled. So this is not dependent upon the expiratory flow rate. Normally, for the termination sensitivity, anything between 5 to 25% of the peak expiratory flow rate can be set. If the inspiratory flow reaches the less than 25% of the flow, then the ventilator goes into the expiratory phase. So these both are flow cycled breaths. So in this, the volume control is there. That's why it is looking square shaped, and this is the pressure controlled form. So it is looking sine shaped. Then here, once the termination sensitivity is reached, the ventilator will go into the expiratory phase, which happens by the elastic recoil of the lung. So here, this is the time cycled breath. Here we have set the appropriate inspiratory time. If it is, for example, if it is 0.35 or 0.4, here the accelerating inspiratory phase and decelerating phase are over. Now here you can see there is a point of no flow, where there is no flow happening, and the baby is kept at the maximum inspiration. So this we should avoid. So here, if we reduce the I time, we can reduce this inspiratory pause. So we have discussed the what are all the things we'll be seeing in the flow scalar. So the first one is how to set the optimum trigger. If you compare the top and the bottom scalars, in the top one, what is happening? Here there is one breath which is not detected by the ventilator, and it is trying to give a breath over here. And then here also, and then here. So there are a lot of asynchrony between the baby's respiratory efforts and the ventilator breaths. This is because we have kept the trigger sensitivity very high, and it is not able to detect these breaths of the baby. Here, once in the lower panel, once we have lowered the trigger sensitivity, it seems more synchronized now. All the breaths of the baby are getting translated into inflations. So to set the optimum trigger, the flow scalar is very useful. And then to evaluate the adequacy of the I time, we have seen in the previous slide here there is a zero flow state. This is due to the longer I time. So here this is adequate I time. If you see this inspiratory hold, then you should reduce the I time and avoid this zero flow state. So what will happen if there is inadequate I time? We have kept a very short I time. So we are not allowing the inspiration to get completely normal to the baseline. Here the inspiration is suddenly dropping to the baseline, and then the baby is going into the expiratory phase. So you can assess the adequacy of the I time with the flow scalar. So how will be air trapping? In the expiration phase, the scalar has not come to the touch the baseline. It is still here, but the E time is over, and then the ventilator is going into the next cycle of inflation. So, which is leading to air trapping or auto peak. So, if you see this type of scalar, you should realize that there is an air trapping or auto peak. So, how will the airway obstruction look like? There will be prolonged lower peak expiratory flow rate and prolonged E time in the airway obstruction, which is seen like this in the flow scalar. So, if there is a leak in the flow scalar, the expiratory limb will shoot above the baseline. This is the leak. So flow synchronization, also called as flow cycling, which allows the patient to determine their own inspiratory time by terminating the breath once a certain percentage of peak inspiratory flow rate is met, which we have already discussed. It is usually kept anywhere between 5 to 25%. So this will flow synchronization or PSV mode may help to improve the ventilation perfusion matching and improves the patient ventilator synchrony. The expiratory synchrony is also there, and it improves the oxygenation and ventilation in the spontaneously breathing patients. So this is the termination sensitivity, which is anywhere between 5 to 25%. So once this flow is reached, then it will go into the expiratory phase. What can you see in this? So here the rate which we have kept is around 30, but the baby is having a very fast rate. That is because of auto cycling. So the ventilator is detecting the secretions in the tubing, and then before this blue one is the breath. Before it is coming to the baseline, one more breath is getting initiated in the assist control mode, which is leading to very high rate than the baby's actual rate. This can lead to a lot of air trapping, and it can also lead to CO2 washout. So the flow time scalar we have seen. Now let's go to the volume time scalar. In this we'll get minimal information. We can know about whether there is a leak or any accidental extubation and adequacy of the tidal volume. That can be seen in the volume time scalar. This is the inspiratory tidal volume, the maximum tidal volume, which was given to the baby or the targeted tidal volume, which we have said, and then it goes into the expiration. So if there is a leak, how it will show, this expiratory part will not return to the baseline. It will not touch the baseline. This is the leak. And if it is overshooting, we can see that the baby is trying to exhale actively. So if there is an accidental extubation, how will it look? So the expiratory limb can be seen, but there will not be any expiratory limb. So if the baby is desaturating and the color is changing and you are not able to see violently in the scalar lobes, so the expiratory limb is not there, then you can think of accidental extubation and do the test displacement obstruction pneumothorax. So an extubation failure, you can see that and identify the problem early if you are regularly seeing the pulmonary. So the tidal volume of the spontaneous breaths are a little lower than the tidal volume of the mechanical breaths. Here the mechanical ventilator breaths are a little higher, but the spontaneous breaths are a little lower. And you can see that with the baby's efforts are there in every breath. So with this volume scalar, you can actually assess the readiness for extubation for the baby. Let's go to the loops now. We have completed the scalars and we have seen what are all the problems which we can identify from the scalars. Let's go to the two loops, pressure volume loop and flow volume loop. So what information we'll get from the pressure volume loop? We can know the changing compliance. So pressure will be in the x-axis and volume will be in the y-axis. We can know the changing compliance after giving surfactant for a preterm baby. We can identify air trapping or over distension. We can identify the leak and we can identify flow starvation if the flow is inadequate. And we can identify if there is optimum opening pressure and increasing resistance in the airway. So this one we have already discussed. Here this part is the P, and here once the volume changes rapidly, this is the lower inflection point of the inspiratory limb, and then this is the slope of compliance curve. And then this is the upper inflection point from where the expiration starts. So this is a controlled breath, inspiratory limb and expiratory limb. This is an assisted breath. Baby has initiated the breath, which is detected by the flow sensor, and then the breath cycle, inflation cycle continues. This is completely spontaneous breath of the baby, in which the inspiratory limb is in the negative side. So you can see the spontaneous breaths like this. So you can know about the type of the breath, and then the changes in the lung compliance and the PV loop. So here this pink one is the lung preterm lung which has the low compliance. Here with the even if the with the increase in the pressure, there is a less change in the volume. So once we give the surfactant, then the compliance increases means this it goes a little higher. This is increased very much increased compliance. Even with a smaller change in the pressure, the volume increases rapidly. So even this one should be avoided. This is seen in meconium aspiration syndrome. Here we have preset the peak inspiratory pressure. That's why the pressure limit is there. Pressure control ventilation. But the volume keeps increasing as the compliance increases. So how does the PV loop look in RDS? It is very flat. So you can see this PV loop is very low with the compliance. The slope of the compliance curve PV loop is like this. It will be around 30 degrees. Once we give the surfactant, the slope of the compliance increases to 45 degrees. It will become more straighter. So this is the pre-surfactant PV loop. Once we have given the surfactant, obviously the lung expansion is there, and reticulogranularity, everything is gone. Now the compliance slope of the compliance curve has increased for this baby. So this is the beaking, which we already discussed. Once we are increasing the pressure beyond a certain limit, there will not be any change in the volume, with little or no change in the tidal volume. So this causes beaking or over distension. We should try to avoid this and decrease what we should do then. We should decrease the peak inspiratory pressure. This middle zone is the safe zone. Here only we should try. We should try to avoid both the zone of atelectasis and zone of over distension. So when there is beaking, there will be decrease in the C20 by C ratio. What is C20 by C ratio? That is the compliance in the last 20% of the inspiratory time. So ideally it should be C20 by C ratio. Ideally should be 1. But if it is less than 0.8, then that means we are giving more pressure to the lung with very less difference in the volume. So this compares the last 20% of the dynamic compliance to the total compliance. So this should be nearer to 1 or more than 1. If it is less than 0.8, then we should decrease the PIP. So what you can see here, the figure of 8 appearance. So the flow is not adequate. So whatever the inspiratory flow which we have kept, maybe this is a bigger baby, they have kept only 6 liters per minute. So the flow is, this is called as flow starvation, figure of 8 appearance. If we increase the inspiratory flow, then the PV loop will become like this, normal. This is the normal loop. So flow starvation can be identified with the PV loop. So leak. So how will you identify the leak? So this is the inspiratory limb. The expiratory limb is not coming to the baseline. It is coming up to here, and then there will be a steep, straight line drop till here. This is how we identify the leak in the PV. So increasing resistance. So if there is a increase in the inspiratory resistance, so both inspiratory and expiratory resistance can increase when there is any tracheal obstruction or secretions. So if there is increase in the inspiratory resistance, the width of the inspiratory limb will increase from the midline. So that leads to the belly of the inspiratory loop. And if there is increased expiratory resistance, then it leads to the hump. So the width of the PV loop increases. So this is the PV loop in the chronic lung disease PPD, in which there is expiratory resistance is also there. Here the PV loop, we have kept very less P, so that's why there is a very flat PV loop. Here the slopes, inspiratory limb starts increasing, the volume starts increasing from here. So here in this condition, if there is a PV loop like this, then we should keep adequate PEEP for the baby. If there is air trapping, then what happens in the PV loop? The FRC, the PEEP, it goes higher and higher. The FRC keeps on increasing. So if you see a notch in the inspiratory limb in the PV loop, it's called we have kept excessive flow, which is leading to the pressure overshoot, and the notch comes in the inspiratory limb. So this is the air trapping in the PV loop. Here, this loop is going a little higher, which is showing the more PEEP and FRC. That means there is a air trapping is there for this baby due to excessive flow rates. So we have seen all the parameters in the PV loop, like air trapping, leak, complaints, slope of the complaints curve. These things we have seen from the PV loop. Now let's go to the flow volume loop. So the flow volume loop, this volume is on the x-axis and the flow is on the y-axis. So this is the functional residual capacity. So here the inspiratory limb will start and the peak inspiratory flow rate will increase like this, and then it comes to the end of the inspiration over here, where the maximum tidal volume will be reached, and then the expiratory phase starts. And then it should reach the FRC again. If it does not reach here, or it ends here, or it goes here, then we can identify either the leak or the air trapping over here in the flow volume loop. So what are the things we can learn from the flow volume loop? We can learn about the resistance patterns, air trapping, and air leak. So here this is the pressure limited type of flow, in which there is an accelerating flow, and then the decelerating inspiratory flow will be there. Similarly, the expiratory also. Here we have limited the volume, targeted tidal volume. So this is more of a flat form, square shaped flow volume loop. So if there is an increased airway resistance, it leads to the scooped out pattern in the expiratory limb. So there is a decreased peak expiratory flow rate. You can see normally it should be like this. If there is an expiratory resistance, it goes to dilators. So this part is normal. If the black line is if the expiratory limb is like this, it is normal. The scooped out appearance is abnormal. It shows the decreased PEFR. So here the expiratory flow is very minimal. Once we have given the bronchodilators, then the expiratory flow increases. This is the response we can see after the bronchodilators. So if the expiratory flow does not reach the baseline and it ends over here, so the complete emptying of the air during the expiration did not happen, and it has led to the air trapping. So if we see in this flow volume loop that it has not reached the baseline, then you should suspect the air trapping over here. So if the expiratory limb has not completely reached, has ended before itself, it ended here instead of being here, you can see there is an air leak. So this happens when the ET tube which we have kept is small, uh, which leads to the air leak like this. So serrations happen when there is a lot of secretions in the tubings. So you can see the expiratory waveform having a lot of sawtoothed appearance or serrations. So then you have to set the humidifier temperature appropriately, check the ambient temperature, and you have to check whether the temperature sensor is outside the warmer. So this and whether it is getting delivered properly or not. So that will ameliorate the problem of this serrations in the expiratory lip of the. So if there is airway obstruction, you can see the similar kind of picture in the expiratory lip. So with this, we have completed the different scalars and loops and pulmonary graphics. Now we will go to the website and see just see the different scalars and loops on the ventilator Excel.
Can you make this the host? What is the name of host? Is this? Is that yours? Okay. So this is SLE 6000 ventilator, and this we have connected all the tubings, and then we have connected the test lung just to show the different waveforms. Here is show the pressure scalar. So suppose if the baby is not at all breathing, if we assume that, then the only the set number of breaths are being delivered with inspiratory flow and inspiratory and the expiratory contact. So here we set the trigger sensitivity. So the trigger sensitivity should always be minimal. So in order to detect all the breaths of the baby, if the trigger sensitivity is set very high, some of the spontaneous breaths of the baby may go undetected. Calibrate the flow sensor. Go to the utilities option, and then we go to the flow sensor and then start calibrating the flow sensor. So while we are calibrating, we have to upload both the ends like this. So and then it will show the calibration is completed. Once the calibration is completed, we will connect this to the proximal end near the endotracheal tube of the baby. So now, how this will detect the flow? In this, it has a heated wire anemometer, which is a tungsten filament. Once the baby starts any inspiratory effort, the difference in the flow will cause the change in the temperature of this filament. So again, the electrical activity which is needed to bring the filament to the same temperature will be detected, and it is shown as a different scalars on the graphical display of the ventilator. So that is how the flow sensor works with the help of the heated wire anemometer in this SLE ventilator. So now we can see all the three types of scalars. So pressure versus time, flow versus time, and volume versus time, which we have already discussed. So now let's see whether we can see if what happens if the baby is trying to breathe. So if we are suppose if the baby is breathing, then you can see the orange line, and then because it's SAME mode, the ventilator is trying to give the breath at the same time. So with this, you can assess how many breaths the baby is taking and assess the readiness for extubation. And if we keep high pressure, it will show here as a high pressure in the pressure scalar, and it's showing the high tidal volume also now. So what will happen if there is any leak in the circuit? So the PIP will obviously it will go down. It will not be as much, and then after some time it will show like high leak also here. Now we are seeing the loops. So this is the pressure volume loop and then the flow volume loop. So the pressure volume loop here, it will begin at the PEEP only. So this is the PEEP which we have set. So if we have set either 4 or 5 or 6, it will begin at which it will not begin in the from the 0. It will begin from the PEEP. And then this is the inspiratory limb and then the expiratory limb. So if we take the midline, that is the slope of the PV loop. So we have to operate in the middle of the PV loop. If you can see now, there is no beaking. That means the pressure is adequate. If we give more pressure, then we can see beaking. So now we have increased the PIP to very abnormal. Normally we don't keep this much. So here you can see that there is beaking is coming like pregnancy. So such high PIP should be avoided. And then if there is a leak somewhere in the tubing, we will see how it comes. So this I have kept 20 now. We will see whether there is a decrease in the beaking. Yeah. So suppose there is a leak somewhere. You can see that here it is immediately falling to the, during the expiration, it is suddenly falling to the PEEP. So if I have slightly disconnected this test lamp, and then this is the flow volume loop in which you can see the volume which we have, volume which gets delivered, the tidal volume, and this is the inspiratory flow and expiratory flow. If there are secretions in the tubings or in the ET tube, then we will see the serration. If the tracheal secretions are there, both inspiratory and expiratory serrations will be there. So here, if the expiratory limb only secretions are there, means then the peak expiratory flow rate, then the expiratory limb will be showing the notches. Suppose if the expiratory limb is not returning to the baseline and it is ending here, then it is called air trapping. If it is ending here, then it is called air leak. So these are the things which we can learn from the loops.